What would be a team you would pick now, Rich? What of the other rosters? Which one? Because here's the thing: if you're both sort of actually casting aspersion on the idea G2 even mixed worlds, who's going to get instead of them? We've already done two big teams. Who's going to get a spot instead of them?
I mean, I guess most people would go either Rogue or Mad.
Which one do you want to do? Spoiler, I'm guessing we're doing both, so it's the order.
Yeah,
which we'll go with first.
Let's just do Rogue first. I say Rogue first. I think Rogue. Wait a second,
let me set it up. So obviously they basically keep all the same players except their jungle and AD carry. So Inspired leaves, obviously now he's on fucking Evil Geniuses over in LCS. By the way, terrible move, but whatever. He'll have to learn that himself. And then instead they got Malrang, who's obviously a Korean jungler, to come and join the team. And then Hans Sama also went to NA for the money. It's weird how it's only Rogue is apparently allowed to sell star players to America only and for massive buyouts. Almost like there's no fucking standards whatsoever in the fan scene at this point. So okay, obviously Hans Sama's over on Team Liquid playing with the corpse of Bjergsen or whatever. He's just playing with Team Liquid and he's just getting paid by Team Liquid realistically, and who gives a fuck at this point? And by the way, at least that corpse, like Frankenstein's monster, had the audacity to just fucking reach out and try and kill Reggie on the way out. So in many ways, me and Bjergsen, you know what, we're getting back together. We're sort of back on the same page again. You know, the enemy of my enemy is someone I'll tolerate as a borderline friend for the moment. Right. He obviously has been replaced, so Comp is the player from Vitality. Obviously, wasn't actually most of it last season. He get replaced by Crown Shot, but people might remember that was where he got his break in the LEC. So, okay, what do you think of? And they keep him Freddy 122 apparently as the coach. So, give us your thoughts then, Rich. What about this Rogue squad?
So the most interesting thing, because obviously we talked a little bit about this on the NA one, because there was some overlap there, obviously with Inspire going to EG. I think one of the most interesting moves is Steel, the previous coach or one of the coaches at Vitality, going to Rogue, because Steel is fluent in Korean.
Right. Okay.
And obviously with Malrang coming over in the jungle, I think that could be potentially very interesting. As I said on the NA episode, I do not know much about Malrang as a player in terms of, I mean, he hasn't been playing many games, obviously, because he was the sub for Dam1, in case anyone didn't know. But where I'm kind of more positive than I think a lot of people may be on Malrang is that I believe, and again, I'm not going to go fully into this as I did earlier, but I'm not been impressed generally with the standard of jungling in Europe over the last year or so. I think, the world's meta was a heavy topside meta. And I think as much as our Western tops did not do well against their Eastern counterparts, I don't think our Western junglers did well against the Eastern counterparts either. So I think by Malrang coming from and this is kind of like a Fnatic 2015 mentality where they're like, oh wow, Hooney's on the reserve team of like some random Eastern team, so let's pick him up. Like there is a touch of that to it, but I do think being the sub player, sub jungler for Dam1 and being in and around the LCK, I expect that this guy just by default has a better understanding of jungle in the last few metas than the Europeans have had. As I said, I don't think that we particularly grasp that very well, and I think they got exposed internationally for sure. And then with Comp, I think Comp is a very good team fighting AD carry. He's the kite machine, as he likes to call himself. I think he's a good player. Obviously, he's not been playing recently, so that's a big question mark, right? Like, obviously he's been playing solo queue, but to what extent does he have proverbial ring rust? We'll have to wait and see. But I think he's a very good AD carry, and I think he's a solid pickup and someone that G2 should have been prioritizing more, as an example. Again, for me, the dynamic of Steel and Malrang is very interesting. But I want to know, again, from Amazing's perspective, what he thinks of that pickup, and I guess like Eastern junglers versus Western junglers in general, because I do feel like there's quite a big gap there at the moment. And this is why I think, by the way, that Rogue will start quickly. Even if they end up being badly and falling away, I think they'll start quickly.
No, I agree with that. I think it could be a similar effect to what Trick had when he came into G2 in 2016. And it's that in Europe, we continuously build up deficits in terms of the jungle understanding. And it's because our laners are very, very vocal. And they're obviously always trying to kind of arrange a certain dynamic with their junglers. So it seems to me that most of the metas, like the junglers, are more follow-ups. Like even Inspired, despite him demanding a lot of attention, he wasn't necessarily someone that was volatile in essence. He actually played quite on the rhythms of his team. So that is not revolutionary. He just played his style very, very well. And the only... Actually, in Europe, there's no jungler where I'm like, this guy plays outside of his team's environment. He does whatever he wants to, and he leads his team forward. Like the closest could be maybe Razork, but I think it's more of us that he sometimes just missteps, and that's why it looks like it's an intentionally volatile playstyle. So I would assume that Maorang is going to bring a lot of expertise into the jungle role, like from an Eastern perspective, and it's going to upgrade the overall structure in Europe and make people more adapt to that Korean or Eastern style, where it seems to be way more revolving around the jungle role itself, and the jungle role dictates whatever's happening on the map at all times almost. So it's not a lane focused style in Korea, it's a very jungle focused style. So that in essence is probably going to drive some kind of jungle evolution forward in Europe. So I'm excited to see that. Though I think that's what you just alluded to. I don't think that's going to persist over the entire season. I think towards Worlds or like towards the end of next year, I don't think they're going to be on the same level as they would be to begin with, because I think that honeymoon phase is going to play a lot into it, especially when you have like someone that you don't really understand. Quite frankly, like despite having a Korean translator, it's still a huge barrier to overcome, because when a season evolves, it's not just about talking about the game. It's talking about random things and like figuring out how you adapt to one another, how you get along with one another, what are things you're crazy about, what do you like, whatever it is. So it's more like the building of interpersonal relationships, and that's kind of hard with most Koreans, even if they adapt to the language to a certain extent, like because it's a different mode of being. In Europe, it's not as much of an issue as in North America, but in Europe, it's still an issue because Koreans do behave differently on average, and some Koreans, quite frankly, from my experience too, are more awkward than others, and that's where you have like the real clashes happening, where Europeans are really open, whatever it is, and they're really confrontational, and someone who may be more reserved, especially from Korean culture, may not quite understand it and may not quite be able to utilize that, because it's more of a top-down structure where the coaches are telling you what they think, and that's not the players themselves that are telling other players what they think. That's actually quite a rarity for Koreans, from my experience.
I actually hate this move. Like, not only, let's be real, this is something we used to say even back when there were Korean imports. Not only is Europe one of the regions where it's like, if you're going to import a Korean, it better actually be Viper or Chovy. Unless it is, I'm not interested. Like, I don't care that you have some guy that was a sob on a team and like, oh, I used to play on the bad teams and else. Who gives a fuck? Did you just miss the part where people like El Yoya and others like come out, Razok, they just come out of the ERLs? Like, the joke is, by the way, the two positions that absolutely Europe never needs to import for a fucking jungle and support. There are a billion of those players in those roles. There are so many. The joke is there's too many to even fit in LEC. Like, you go in the ERLs and there's players who are mega in those positions. So I think it's outrageous. Now, I will say, I noticed when I saw on Reddit that they claim like Blummigan, who's one of the assistants for Rogue, apparently worked with this guy when they played on like a team in TCL, the Turkish league, Royal Bandits, years and years ago. So I assume this is one of those ones where, like, I heard apparently after the episode last time, Rich, that the reason why Peter Dunn wants this Jojo Pion guy is he also was scouting this guy for years and years, and like, you know, would have tried to get him in Mad Lions. So I think it's one of those ones where, like, you know, the coach thinks he has an in, like, this guy's secretly super sick and he just didn't have the right players on him. The problem is, the few times I saw this guy play in LCK over the years, he looked all right, like he had mechanics, etc. Yeah. But this is the part I don't get, is like I said before, like, it better be a superstar player. You notice I also didn't list any fucking junglers there. Why would I recruit a Korean jungler to play in a European team? It's probably the most heavy comms position in the whole fucking game. Like, even if this guy indeed speaks English, that ain't enough. Because, like, you have to also, it's not just literally communicate. It's like, communication, by the way, isn't just literally, I say words you understand. It's you understand what I am saying. You get the concept I am saying. I'll give a very, very brief example that might blow people's minds. When that guy Seraph, back in the day, joined Monty's Renegades team to be their top laner and was like a talent coming out of solo queue, this guy, when he started talking to them in English, they discovered mad shit. Like, Koreans had totally different, like, concepts. Like, there wasn't like put it this way, it took them ages before he understood what they meant by like fucking zoning someone out in top lane. Like, they had to, like, just to explain the concept, like they conceived of it in a totally different way, basically. So to me, like, these moves occasionally can work, and obviously they look amazing, like the old Hoonie Rain Over one's probably the best example ever. But in my opinion, like, this could easily be a miss. And the bigger discussion I wanted to actually spin off of this too, actually, especially with you, Rich, goes like this. For both Rogue and for Mad Lions, I want to have a little sidebar discussion. Obviously, amazing, jump in whenever you feel like it. But this is the discussion. If we're going to critique Fnatic the last couple of years for like, look, they're not the org they were before. If you notice in general, although I'll say fair play, they did buy Wonder. In general, they don't pay big buyouts. They don't tend to actually buy big name players. They either get back old players that just want to play for them again, Reckless and Soaz in the past years, or they just go for rookies back when everyone else didn't go for rookies and they could get the best rookie every time. So if you look at the current Mad Lions and Rogue, after this year obviously, but I mean last year's worth of play, what people are going to look, Rich, and if you're a fan who only watches inside the server, the matches of LEC essentially, to you, Rogue and Mad Lions were the best teams overall, and so logically they should be the new G2 and Fnatic, right? They should retain all their talent, and they should be the ones signing like fucking Alfari and, you know, these players, like, but they're not. They're not only not signing them, they're going back to trying to get people from ERLs. They're trying to pick out talents you've never seen before. What do you think on this angle? Like, what does it imply about where the orgs are at? Because on paper, in other games, I've heard Rogue's supposed to have money. Mad Lions, I've got my reservations. They don't seem to spend money in any game. What do you think of where the org aspect's like in this sense? Does this imply anything? Do you think they would have done it anyway?
So the thing is, it's hard for me to comment because I actually know exactly everything about why Rogue made the decisions they made. So I can't really speak to that because it is it's not really for me to say. What I would say is, speaking from a sort of fan perspective, if I am just looking at this, as you say, from what's been seen in the Rift and what I would assume was like going through their heads, I think an obvious question that fans would ask of Rogue is, why did you sell players? Okay, maybe it's sort of creating almost this new economics meta where it's like you sign really good players to long deals and then just sell them for loads of money. Okay, sure, that makes sense to the average fan, but I can understand the big question being, well, why don't you then just at least reinvest half of that and make sure that you're not really downgrading anything?
They arguably sold the two best players.
Right, exactly. Well, Hansen is, I mean, you could definitely make that argument. So I think that fans, based on the information they have, should be down on Rogue's off season. Yeah. I don't think there's a reason not to. When it comes to Mad Lions, again, I think they should be down. I know a bit about what happened with Mad as well. And obviously, this is something that, to me, I think it's kind of crazy that the biggest story of the off season is not Mad allowed Humanoid to go to Fnatic.
Isn't that crazy?
That is the biggest LEC story by a mile. And here's the sad reality of Mad Lions. No one gives a fuck about you. You guys just won 2 LEC titles. You were the only the only European team to get out of groups at Worlds.
Yes.
Nobody cares about your org. Nobody. So I think Mad Lions have failed on a fundamental level in terms of branding and building up the value of their business. They don't have a fan base. They've already achieved as much as could possibly be expected. Obviously, you would have hoped if they got a better draw in Worlds, they'd have gone around further, most likely. But outside of that, they haven't capitalized at all. And what's their reward for winning 2 LEC titles and getting out of groups? Well, now you've lost arguably the best player in the league, and he's gone to your biggest rival, who is now probably going to use that player to beat you in your own league next split. So to me, that's like that should be the biggest story.
Absolutely.
I think that, and this is obviously a bit of conjecture, I think that one of the reasons why Mad were comfortable to do this is I believe the coaching staff is incredibly arrogant and they believe that they can make it work with whoever they
think they've got the talent factory. They can just keep bringing them through and it'll all work.
And what I would say is, on the 2 players that they brought in, Rika, so outside of Shayak, if we put him to the side because he couldn't join LEC for a number of reasons, I think Rika, you could make a case that he was the best mid laner outside of the LEC in terms of ERL players. And I do think he is a good player. And I do think he's a good economical pickup for sure if you're not going to go for the big names. But again, there's the same question mark. So presumably Humanoid was sold for a lot. Why are we getting a little in terms of value-wise back from it? And then Unforgiven, again, we can have different opinions on how good Kazi is or not. But I think all of us would feel more comfortable if Kazi was there than Unforgiven, even if I'm lower on him than either of you are. So I do think that was a strange one. And as I said, similarly to the list I made on Flacked, I do think that Unforgiven is a better player than Flacked. I do actually think Unforgiven is a good AD carry, but there are a whole bunch of names that I'd have felt a lot more comfortable about going for rather than Unforgiven, including players who have no LEC experience. Of the pool of players who've never played in LEC, there are a bunch of guys I'd have taken before Unforgiven. So yeah, I'm a bit confused by that, and I think that Mad should probably be disturbed by how little hate they're getting for their off-season moves, because really it just means that nobody gives a fuck. So yeah, and as for the remaining pieces, I think Elyoya is fine. I think he's okay. I do feel like Humanoid and Kaiser were the team that made this, were the players that made this team tick. Armu is like okay as well, but these are, in my opinion, the top side of the map is no longer championship caliber. You're not contenders. If Armu, Elyoya, and Rika are your top side, you're not contenders. And then Unforgiven, Kaiser, it's just I don't like these moves at all. And I actually think that
want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.